So the dragon and the beast from the land and the beast from the sea are being dealt with. Their goal was satanic from the beginning, and that was to lead people away from God. And for that, they and all who followed them are being punished. It's not God's fault that this happens. We've already seen he's done everything he can to help people avoid that. You with me? Comments or questions so far?
But how many times do we hear people, maybe not curse God, but blame God?
Why did God let this bad thing happen to me?
Yeah, why?
He's not really a loving, he's just a mean person that punishes everybody.
By the way, as tough as it is, that's an opportune time to step into somebody's life and let them vent. And then when you're able to be able to impart some truth to them. I was thinking, for example, about the mother and father who were on the news today, who's was it a 10-year-old girl was raped and murdered by those two undocumented, illegal, whatever you want to call them, people, and the grief that they were experiencing. Unbearable, I would imagine. And they're probably asking the question of why would God allow my one and only child to be taken away? If I were visiting with them and that's the phraseology that they would use, I would eventually get to the point to help them understand, you know, God does understand what it's like to lose a one and only. He's been there.
It reminds me of the movie, was it The Shack, where the little girl had been abducted? Wasn't that?
Crises are often very opportune times to come in and get involved in somebody's life. And most people would say, but I don't know what to say. Let me tell you something. You don't have to say anything. Just the mere act of your presence says a lot. Jesus said that the Holy Spirit will give us the words to speak when we don't know what to say. But I can tell you, I remember when my father passed away. I was a young 23-year-old, newly married. I do not remember much of what people said. I remember that standing at Dad's grave when they lowered his casket in and the undertaker was waiting for people to leave so they could finish their job. Pastor Cole did lean into me and he said, you know, Jim, there's going to come a day when your dad comes out of that grave and death goes in, never to hurt again. I remember that. But I remember the faces of people who showed up at the funeral, or the visitation, who brought food to the house. I don't remember what they said, but the mere fact that they were there, just to sit with somebody in their grief, it's powerful. Is it easy? No. Would you rather be somewhere else? Yes. Is that God calling you into something you may not want to do? Most likely. That's why as a pastor, when people would ask me to do funerals for people I didn't know, I most oftentimes would do that because it was an opportunity. The Bible says the wages of sin is death. It's right there in the box. You can see it. What a great time to tell them about what Christ has done. I never preached somebody into heaven if I didn't know their faith. I've heard that pastors have done that in the past. Jim Higbee, I'm giving you a little free sermon here. Jim Higbee was the funeral director in Aurora, Nebraska. Why do I know Jim, besides that we did a lot of funerals together? Because Jim and I experienced the same thing. In small town rural Nebraska, pastors and funeral directors ain't normal people. And so we might invite them over for Sunday dinner, but we don't want them coming and hanging out with us. So we had nobody else to hang out with. He told me that there was one point that one of my predecessors at that church had buried somebody, and Jim told me that they wanted so badly to go and open up the coffin to see if the guy the pastor was talking about was the same guy in the box. I resolved in his counsel never to do that. I don't know if somebody's in heaven or hell. I really don't. Based on their testimony, we can be pretty darn sure. But I never, if I didn't know somebody, I wouldn't give false hope.
But you would speak the
I
gospel.
would speak the gospel. Absolutely. As often as I could. It's an opportunity to sit with somebody in their pain. And I know that there's going to be people in heaven because somebody walked into the life in their pain and told them about Jesus. I know that.
I was at a funeral yesterday for the first cousin. She was old enough really to almost be an aunt. She was married to my aunt's oldest son. And it was one of the oldest children in my mother's family. There was no mention of gospel anywhere, and it was a Presbyterian pastor. And she was very faithful to that church. Now she's 90. So in her younger days, she was very active, and I think had a very strong faith. No mention, not one word other than a Bible verse.
I remember one of the most difficult funeral sermons I did for somebody I didn't know. It was the brother of a member when I was serving in Round Rock. And he was a Harley Davidson biker guy. She told me he believed in Jesus. I didn't know him, so I didn't go there. I talked to them, and what was weird is in the back, when these bikers come in dressed in their biker regalia, I was ready for that. What I wasn't ready for is all the coming from the back pew during the service.
They were drinking beer.
But I had the wisdom to not say, "Hey, get out of here," which was one of the thoughts like, "I can't believe you're doing this." I just preached the harder.
I can remember a funeral that I went to. There was a guy that I knew real well, and we all gathered it was at a funeral home, and we all gathered there, and we were waiting to, who's going to see this? Where are we going to see? And we just stood around. And then the guy, the head of the funeral home, he said, "This ends the service." That's all it was. That was one word said. We just gathered there.
I've done
And I
that.
felt lost. I mean, I wasn't happy.
I'll give you a recent example. Dolores recently asked me to do the funeral of her brother, and I met with the widow, met with Dolores, and knew this man's story. He was a Christ follower. Not a hard sermon to do. When you don't know, you just lay out sin and grace, law and gospel.
You done several for us friends and such
Yes,
like
sir.
that. The fella at the cemetery, St. Jerome Cemetery. Now that's something I did not know that he was a Christ follower or not. But you talked to his sister.
Yep, talk to a sister. I'll do that again if you need it.
Yeah.
Every now and then Tracy will call.